Thank you all for joining us today. We'll start in just a minute. It's always exciting to see the attendee numbers go up. Thank you all for joining us today. Okay, so it's about a minute after. We'll go ahead and get started and folks can keep joining. Welcome to the Hood Museum of Art's virtual program series. I'm Isadora Talia, the Campus Engagement Coordinator, and today we have the pleasure of hearing from John Stomberg, the Virginia Rice Kelsey 1961 S Director, who will introduce us to public art on campus. If your device allows, you can enhance your viewing experience of this program by clicking on the viewing options next to the green bar that notes the speaker is sharing their screen. Scroll down to the side by side, and you should be able to view both the presentation and the speaker without overlap. You may also zoom in on the presentation by adjusting your zoom ratio, which is also located under viewing options. And if you're using an iPad, you can use your fingers to zoom in and out while touching the screen. Today's program will run for about 45 minutes with some time for questions near the end. Please feel free to answer your questions at any time during the program into the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can during the time we have. Please also note we are recording, and this program will be made available on YouTube in the near future. And with that, I'll turn it over to John Stomberg.
Great, thank you, Isadora. It's really a pleasure to see you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be online today. The goal for my talk is to kick off a series of talks about public art. We are hoping to be able to do some of these in person and some of these online as the season unfolds. I don't need to explain to you all the complications involved with that. But my goal today is really to talk about the art on campus and why it's there and how we come up with the process to put it there, and not to talk about the specific works of art so much, because that's really our plan for through the year, is to take individual works and do deep dives into them. And the reason for today's initial talk is that literally as we speak, there is a crew installing the artwork that I'm showing you now. It's being installed beside Rollins Chapel. It's a beautiful Ursula von Rydingsvard cedar sculpture that we will do our best. We're building a drain around it. We will do our best to keep it for as long as we can, but we do understand that it is wood sculpture, and perhaps our great-great-grandchildren won't be able to enjoy it in the same way that we're going to be able to enjoy it. So to kind of kick off this season of the fall season, where we will be spending a lot of time outdoors looking at public art, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how the work ended up where it did and how the work ties into its locale. And then you will look forward to Jessica Hong, our curator of global contemporary art, talking about the Ursula von Rydingsvard in the coming month or two once it's installed. And that might even be an outdoor talk. So we have that to look forward to. So let's start in our one kind of formal sculpture courtyard, the Maffei Arts Plaza. And probably the highlight of that plaza in some ways is the huge and well-known Ellsworth Kelly panels. How did we end up with these beautiful 5 panels in the middle of this courtyard? The view that you're seeing is the view from the art school. So hopefully that answers a lot of those questions, because if you were an art student and you're looking out the window, perhaps hoping for momentary inspiration, a good thought, waiting for an idea, you look across and you see bands of pure color. And for Ellsworth Kelly, the artist who made this piece, color was the essence of joy in art. It's very much an Henri Matisse idea that just the color itself, regardless of what you did with it, helps shape experience. So this is a motivator, inspiration for young art students, and it also announces the arts district in a way. The Maffei Arts Plaza is, in many ways, our entranceway to where's the Hop, the art school, and the museum. So this really signals that. We will have somebody else speaking to this mural specifically in the not too distant future, but it's good to wonder why there's 5 panels when the colors of the spectrum are 7. And I think the architecture answers that question for us. Ellsworth had to make some keen decision and basically jettisoned purple and violet so that he could end up with these 5 colors, which he really loved. But some of the things that we worry about, for example, are birds' nests. This is the thing that you get to worry about when you do public art. Birds that nest behind these panels, and then how do we get in there without scratching them to take care of the bird's nest? And how are we kind to the birds and let them have a full season? So when you start to get into public art, outside art, you get into a lot of issues like birds and squirrels and rain and weed whackers and lawnmowers that you don't have to deal with in the confines of the museum. The Kelly panels are painted with airplane paint, so it's an incredibly sun-resistant and hard paint, but we do have the exact color combination so that in the future, if they do fade, we can have these aluminum sheet, powdered coated aluminum sheets redone for us. So as you move around the Maffei Arts Plaza, you can really see these Kelly panels from almost any angle. And I can testify that I usually walk into work through the Maffei Arts Plaza, and it's always a joy, whether it's raining or snowing or bright and sunny. Those panels just bring a kind of lift to your spirits. And they work in a very different vocabulary than the sculpture that you see in stainless steel just in front of it, which is our Kiki Smith sculpture, Refuge. And you can see that, like the building behind it, the Kiki Smith sculpture is really quite erratically shaped. She loved this placement because if you follow around the ridgeline of the sculpture, and you see how you go up and down and in and out, and then you follow along the ridgeline of Charles Moore's original building, you see that there's a really wonderful play, a dance between the forms of the building and the forms of the stainless steel sculpture. This is a placement that the artist worked on very carefully. By the way, Ellsworth Kelly was on site the entire time we did the Kelly panels. And you can see he designed it for that building, the one we were just referring to. You can see that was very clearly designed to fit exactly that building. Kiki Smith had this space in mind as she manufactured the final version of this. It was a commission, but it was something she had in mind. So it was somewhere between a discussion and a commission. And in the foreground, you see a rabbit, and in the background, you see forms evocative of snow. And it was about taking refuge in a less than friendly climate. There are political overtones. I don't want to steal any thunder from the person who's going to present this sculpture, but it really fit in well with the times as well. So in this one plaza, you have 2 very different takes on art that the art students look out on. They have a very expressive one, kind of this more emotional or irrational one, and then it's balanced against the kind of minimal and restraint of Ellsworth Kelly. And the hope is that these 2 sculptures provide every student on campus with inspiration, but in particular, by being co-located with the art school, that they are reminders that there's no one way to make art and that there are so many possibilities in the world of art. And so hopefully, don't get frustrated would be the message of this. So then we have the latest addition to the Maffei Arts Plaza. This is the Joel Shapiro that was moved here. And I want to take a minute and talk about this because the Joel Shapiro was a site-specific work of art made for a site that no longer exists. So what do you do in that case? Here it is, where it stayed for over 30 years of its life inside the courtyard. That would place it inside the hallway of at the front of the Hood Museum of Art today. He had made it with the building in mind. It's not an exact tie, but just the same way we were discussing the Kiki Smith's erratic top, you can see that the roof line is similar to the arms akimbo of the Joel Shapiro, which is permanently leaning back. So how do you deal with this sculpture that was made for a place that no longer has a place? Well, what you do is you start by talking with the artist, and you start to consider the options. And he was very clear that he had made this for the context of Charles Moore architecture. That was really important to him. Even the color of the patina was designed a little bit with the roof and the brick in mind and how it would look in the context of those Charles Moore colors. But as all of you who are supporters of the Hood know, it had to come down. So what you see here is the huge crane which reached over the old wall, hoisted the huge Joel Shapiro up, and put it on the flatbed, as you can see on the right here. The planning, the engineering that went into moving this was just astonishing. And for those of you who remember, it was temporarily sited on a block that had to be, I believe it was 60 tons of concrete to counterweight the height of the poured bronze sculpture. So there it is on its flatbed. It didn't have to go far. It only went around the block, but to do that, we had to close up the town and move it around the block. So what we did is we talked with the artist, and our designer, Patrick Dunphy, who had a good relationship with the artist, started making these drawings to show what it could look like in the Maffei Arts Plaza, still in the context of the Charles Moore architecture. At this point, he was a little dismayed at being, he didn't want to be crowded. And we had to show that actually he had good company, great artists, and he had enough room, and he was persuaded that this would work. And he was persuaded by these very drawings that Patrick Dunphy, our exhibition designer, drew up. And you can see the way the leaning sculpture works around the arch of the building, that the roof lines are again picked up in the limbs akimbo of this wonderful Joel Shapiro sculpture. And it probably is the last sculpture for back here, maybe one more. If you see the large flat brick area on the right, that's a possibility for one more sculpture. We might be, as you can see from this street view, we really were getting pretty busy. And after presenting him with these drawings, he came around, and next thing you know, we had it hoisted up on a smaller crane and going in on a new block in its new home, where it now lives quite happily, I have to say, on the south facade of the Charles Moore building of the Hood. So it's a big deal when you move a site-specific sculpture. Not all of our sculptures were made for their site, a phenomenon that's often derided as plunk art. In other words, you take it and you plunk it down, and the artist has no particular investment in the siting of that. We try not to do that, but of course we have some that we've acquired and we look for a place for it. But the Maffei Arts Plaza now has grown quietly and carefully, and with each artist carefully involved in the siting of their artwork. So we might be able to fit one more big one and maybe one small one, but the Maffei Arts Plaza is really reaching maturity as an art space where each work of art has an opportunity to speak for itself. And it's a very important place for us as a reminder that you're entering into the arts district. We do have a few pieces of what one might consider slightly more traditional artwork, artwork that serves as a memorial or that serves a purpose beyond its art identity. The Kelly and the Joel Shapiro and the Kiki Smith are really artworks that the Kiki Smith has a relevance to the presence of women on campus, but it's not immediately perceived in the same way that this sculpture, the fountain figure, is in memory of World War II Dartmouth students. So this is a monument and a memorial sculpture by Thomas Huxley Jones, who was a Dartmouth instructor. It's a beautiful mid-century humanist expressionist piece. It looks skyward and the water around it. It's really a beautiful memorial where one can go and think about bravery, freedom. The evocations of this type of sculpture are meant to have a kind of a moral imprint on us. So this is located right near the entrance to the Hopkins Center, which has for so long been the heart of student activities. So the hope was that this would be part of every student's life, and that sometime during your day when you're getting your mail or getting a coffee, you'd stop and you'd remember the sacrifices of soldiers in World War II. And it's really kind of a beautiful spot. It's down below and surrounded, so it tends to be a pretty intimate experience. Another realist sculpture that we have on campus is an honorary to the poet Robert Frost, who had a long relationship with the college. Here we see Frost, who was known for going out and sitting in the woods and writing his poetry. So this is not in a prominent place, because if you think about it, as a poet, you wouldn't sit in the middle of the green to write your poetry. You'd go off somewhere. However, if we put it too far off, nobody would ever see it. So it's on a hill just behind the green, just up from the green, behind Dartmouth Hall and back in there. And it's actually quite a nice surprise when you're walking along back there to find this figure of Robert Frost, as though he were having a little late afternoon solace in the woods and writing his poetry. This too is bronze. It was a gift to the college. But those two are pretty atypical for the college's art collection on campus. A more kind of the merger of modernism and realism that you find in this Alan Hauser, Peaceful Serenity. This is a mother and child and infant, the evocation of a baby in her arms, reduced to significant form, which was very much a modernist concept. Alan Hauser is also a Native American, was a Native American sculptor, and the importance of that fact, having a Native American artist on campus, was a key factor in getting this work here. He had a long-time connection with Dartmouth, and his estate is still run by a Dartmouth grad, and Alan Hauser is a key part of our understanding of public sculpture on campus at Dartmouth. So someday when you walk around, you will hopefully get a chance to encounter this and see it like this. This is one of those sculptures where, for no particular reason, sparrows, I believe English sparrows, love making nests in the concavity that is the mother's head. So almost every year we are in the unfortunate position of being landlords, evicting non-paying sparrows from their hatch. We try and get there early enough in the spring so that they don't really have any family, because then it would be a different kind of moral problem. But this too this is one of the things that we deal with when we deal with public art. But as you work your way around campus now, you've come off the green, you're getting farther afield. This sculpture denotes the home of Native American studies. So there is a direct relationship between the placement of this sculpture and the work that goes on in the buildings surrounding it. The Inuk-Suk is another Native American, this time northern, very northern sculpture. The pile of rocks is made both practically and artistically in the forest where one would walk. And the idea is to give reassurance that people have been here before, but also offer direction. So you're supposed to be able to look through these and see, where you're going, or, the proposal, like if you're going over to that next big mountain, you can look through here. But there's a real strong philosophical side to a sculpture like this that has to do with looking at your past and your future. And the artist was particularly taken by this location. So chose this location very carefully. It's in front of admissions. So were you to stand on the street and you've just come to visit, you look through and you see admissions as your future. If you come out of admissions and you're happy, you look through and you see Dartmouth Hall and the green as your future. So it was very carefully placed, and it's a wonderful piece about finding your direction in life, finding where you should go, staying on the path, and having the comfort, the foreknowledge that you are not alone as you move through this world together. And here's the artist working on the placement of those stones. Unfortunately, storms and other incursions have made it necessary for us to try and do more than simply pile them. There's little bits of mortar holding this together now. In an ideal world, they would just be left alone, but that's not the way it is on a college campus. Although I can say we have very little trouble with human interactions with our sculptures that end up causing repair. And those are, by the way, usually inadvertent. Now, this is one of the sculptors for which Dartmouth College's sculpture program is well known, deservedly so. Mark de Souvreau's 1970 sculpture. When this sculpture was landed at colleges right out in front of Sanborn, this was really radical. This is 50 years ago now that this sculpture came out. It was anti-form. It was monumental. It was built out of construction materials. It had this playful swing on it, so it was like interactive, and you touched it, and it actually changed. If you sit on that swing and you see those cables, you subtly shift this whole thing. That's the X, and then the delta is changed, so it's an X that changes, and you are the change. You, the visitor of the change. There's so many ideas that came along with this, that the idea that this could be art, serious art, was challenging for many people, and it caused an uproar. And I can say part of that too was perhaps the process. There wasn't a lot of fanfare heralding the arrival of this new sculpture. We just apparently put it out there one night, and students woke up and there it was on campus. It has gone on to be one of the most heralded, most published public artworks on our campus, because it was at a moment when very few people were buying Mark de Souvreau's. And here was this major Mark de Souvreau on a college campus. So it was really a bold step forward. It has been moved twice since then. I happen to love its most recent home. So this was not a site-specific artwork in the way that the Ellsworth Kelly or the Kiki Smith were really, or the Joel Shapiro were really made for a specific place. This sculpture holds its own. It definitely impacts the way you feel about the environment, but it probably found its best home here near the mathematics department. And that is between the library and the mathematics department. And it makes sense if you think of X delta. It's a kind of wonderful math pun, but it also is an inspiration to the engineering students who are doing their math classes there. And it has been quite beloved since then. And it is now a popular place to congregate, to go for a swing, to have your picture taken. It is fully interactive, and it's one of the sculptures about which we worry the least. You know, it's I-beams and cable, and you know, it's really in great shape. And so people can sit on it and touch it, and we just don't have worries about that. It was made 100% with the idea that it would be an engaging work of art, and that you could touch it and not feel bad about that. And that's one of the fun things about public art. The other end, the other bookend to the most famous art we have is this Beverly Pepper Fell from 1975 to 77. Again, this was a really bold acquisition for Dartmouth, for anybody. Nobody was yet buying major Beverly Peppers. And this sculpture, which we will have a talk about, emerges from the ground, and it's meant to be both earth art and art that incorporates the earth, which is a real challenge in terms of some of the practicalities, which I've been letting you in on today. This one, for example, gets hit by lawnmowers. It has chipmunks, it has birds, it has rust, it has people sitting on it. The goal is for it to look like it just emerged right out of the grass, and the grass is still holding onto it. But to achieve that, we've got real grass sitting on this construction. So every 5 or 8 years, it needs an overhaul. And with this kind of sculpture, you're less concerned, or we are less concerned with the exact touch. You know, like we would never mess with the patina on a bronze sculpture that was in the museum proper. But the surface of an outdoor sculpture is a different topic. It's more in play, if you will, for conservation. So just this week, this sculpture too is being cleaned up. So anybody who comes to this area, you know, this is just around the corner now from where the Ursula von Rydingsvart is going, next to the Rollins Chapel. You'll not only get to see the brand new Ursula von Rydingsvart, new to us, but you'll get to see a cleaned up Beverly Pepper, who passed away recently. It's heartbreaking, but we do have a really important work for her. And I can tell you that I often have fantastic conversations with students about this work, because when you spend enough time, you start to get the similes going. It's like glass, it's like ice, it's like an iceberg, it's like a demolished city. And so all of that kind of creative information starts coming out from this. And yet it is exactly what it is. It is triangles and squares and blocks in dirt and grass. So it's both minimalism, but it's impossible for it not to end up taking on some allusion, some poetic allusion, even though it really is designed to be minimal. So this is a piece about which we are super proud to own on campus. And that has been here for, you know, ever since it was installed, and we will continue to maintain it in place, and hope that we can keep it alive for a very long time. Not all of our sculpture will be permanent. We've had this William Turnbull on view for about a year. It's been just outside the Hood Museum. This zone here, we see as a place for changing art. So stay tuned, whether it'll be in the garden or out here on the blocks or closer to Wilson Hall. The idea for this area is to change the public art every year or two so that we get surprised as well. One of the overreaching accomplishments of public art is surprise encounters with art. You're walking along, suddenly, hey, there's this thing, looks vaguely like a horse. And now you're having an interior conversation with yourself, or maybe an exterior conversation with your friends about art, placement, creativity, form, and that's just lovely. You didn't make a decision to go into the museum. You weren't necessarily preparing yourself for that occasion, but part of your daily life includes this sudden jolt of creative thought. And that's a great accomplishment for public art on a college campus. So one of the ways that we want to do that is by changing it around sometimes. Most public art has a pretty long shelf life in place. You know, we don't move these things around. Even the the Marc de Souvero, which has been around for 50 years, it's only moved 2 or 3 times, 3 times, 4 times. I mean, it's not like we move it around on a regular basis. So this will be a nice spot to move things around. And this also comes down in the next week or two. So there's a lot happening with public art on campus, which will certainly make it worth your while to come visit again soon. Even though the doors to the museum won't be open, there will be some wonderful art on campus to see. So I wanted to start to wrap up. Start to wrap up by looking to the future and letting you in on an early set of ideas. For any of those of you who are Dartmouth watchers, you know that all the construction these days is in the West End, where the new Irving Institute, which you see here, and the new Thayer, and it'll be a very exciting place. It's got a great landscape plan, and I thought you might find this interesting. This is some work that the college did with my input with the landscape architects, and I'm just going to show you one. There's actually 5 sites. So we're looking at site E, which is the 5th site, and you can see how we begin to think about where a work of art could go. We don't want it right in front of the building. We want that main access there. And we don't necessarily want it framed by a building. It would be nice if it was off to the left a little bit. So that E in the circle with a triangle on top of it shows you the point of view. You're standing there, you're viewing sculpture E, and it's off to your left across that field. So then what that looks like in a rendering with the imaginary new Irving Institute, there shows you a sculpture about 25 feet tall there on the left, that egg shape. So this is how we work. We start thinking about, okay, imagine you've got this 25-foot tall airspace. We don't have to fill the whole 25 feet, but that's about as high as you'd want to go visually. So now we can begin thinking about physically what would go there. And then we have to start thinking about the way it associates with the buildings that are around it. You've got business, you've got engineering, you've got science, you've got energy studies. There's a lot of thematic ways into a sculpture that might seem appropriate for there. But you've also got new architecture, and overall, I think the theme of this area is creative, forward-looking thought. So you want to have a sculpture that kind of embraces creativity, mathematics, engineering, forward thinking, all of that sort of in one sculpture. We might have one in our collection that would do. We do have this beautiful George Rickey, for example. It has been in the Darling Courtyard for many years in the Hop. It was not designed for that spot. And it's actually not that happy in that spot. You see the 2 arms, which are downward facing in this photograph. They're meant to flow freely in the breeze and move around. This is literally a drawing in space, a sculpture drawing that is never stayed. It's always moving. It's also an engineering feat. It's a fantastic set of gears and wires that allow this thing to move in unbelievable variation of forms that express geometry in a kind of infinite array. So the George Rickey, which we already own, is a contender. It would look really good down there. But we don't want to limit ourselves only to what we already own, because for an outdoor sculpture, you really want to get it right. And you want to do something exciting as well. And I love George Rickey. You know, a couple jobs ago, we made a major George Rickey installation on campus. It was beautiful. It still looks beautiful. But there are other alternatives. And when you start thinking about the Energy Institute, energy and society, and all of the ways that that could be thought of in terms of a sculpture, Alice Aycock comes to mind. Alice Aycock makes these incredibly large powder-coated aluminum sculptures based on cyclonic modeling imagery with a computer. So you're sort of looking inside a tornado and thinking about the energy that that has. So that in front of the Energy Institute, and also in terms of the engineering and then the mathematics, it all also makes a lot of sense to me. So maybe we should be looking at an Alice Aycock. Maybe we should be looking at a Roxy Payne. These are trees made out of stainless steel. Stainless steel. Somebody just asked for Louise Bourgeois to come back. I'll talk about that. The Roxy Payne, these are beautiful trees made out of stainless steel that talk about nature versus human-made environments, how they survive, but also things like mathematics, again, fractile imagery. They're really fantastic. So, maybe we would want to get something along those lines. Then there's Kenneth Snelson, who famously, excuse me, for some reason, there it is. Kenneth Snelson, who famously came up with the idea of tensegrity. He was an artist, absolutely an artist, but came up with a key engineering concept, which is the strength of the pipe versus the structural integrity versus the tension of the cable holds this whole thing together. It's a concept that he shared with his professor, Buckminster Fuller, who ended up taking full credit for it later in life. But there's been revisionist history done on Kenneth Snelson, and apparently he came up with this while he was still in grad school studying with Buckminster Fuller. The point isn't who came up with the idea first, but it is a fantastic point, and he's able to achieve these drawings in space that defy your expectations for gravity and what engineering could be. And then we could also take a more philosophical approach. Zhan Wang makes these huge scholars rocks out of stainless steel. To achieve this is a manufacturing tour de force. This is a scaled up model of a small piece of lava stone that was on a scholar's desk to inspire reverie and reflection. And this contemporary artist has made them mammoth, this one about 10 feet tall, and out of stainless steel, so it literally embodies reflection. So it's nice to think about the spiritual philosophical possibilities as they blend in with nature and engineering in the future. So that's the current project. The Ursula von Ruydingsvard will be up by the end of the week. The next sculpture that we do will probably be in front of the Hood Museum pretty soon. And then after that, we'll be down on the West End working with our colleagues in engineering and energy studies and business, thinking about some appropriate work for the West End. So with that, I can turn it back now for questions. I believe we still have, yep, we're right on schedule. So if you have questions, let Isadora know, and I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, John. That was a great presentation. Yes, please do send any questions via the Q&A function. We have time for a couple. One that we have, attendees said that they've noticed other campuses have public art and outdoor sculpture. Why do you think it's important for a college campus to have public outdoor sculpture?
Great question, thank you. I think that public art around campus offers students who aren't inclined to come into the museum an opportunity to have kind of enriched lives. I mean, you know, in this slide that I've got up right now, you can see people playing foosball or something in the shelter of the beautiful Ellsworth Kelly panels. You can see somebody walking up. Their experience, their daily experience is actually colored, no pun intended, by those Kelly panels. And they really help change your everyday life. If you reminisce about your time at Dartmouth, you might say, and there was art around, and that was really kind of nice. So we're trying to make students who are creative visually as well as intellectually. And we're hoping that to have a stimulating visual environment, both architectural and art, helps inspire that. And one person did mention the Louise Bourgeois eye, which was just about where that gentleman in the red shorts is now. Sorry, not the Louise Bourgeois eye, the spider, the arachnid. That was on loan, unfortunately. We did love having that sculpture, but without putting a specific point on it, that sculpture cost half of the cost of the new Hood Museum of Art. Half the cost of the building just for that one sculpture. So we weren't able to get it. But thank you. We loved the Louise Bourgeois too.
Thank you. We do have a number of questions. We'll probably have time to get to a couple. So I'll give you two, a quick one and then
Okay.
I want to follow up. So where will the Ursula von Ratingsvarg be installed on campus?
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, which public art piece resonates most with you, John, and why?
Ooh, that's a toughie. The second one's a toughie. It's like, what's your favorite child? Okay, but first, the Ursula von Ratingsvarg is, if you were facing the chapel, Rollins Chapel, it's going to be just to your left, very close to the street. There was, for 12 or 14 years, there was a long Richard Nonis sculpture, which was planks of wood buried in the ground. And those were always meant to have a limited life. As soon as they started growing mushrooms and turning rotten, we were supposed to take it out. It was a limited lifespan artwork. So that has come out. So the Zantrap Memorial is behind you, and the Ursula von Ratingsvarg will be there. It doesn't enter your view. You can totally see the whole Rollins Chapel. You can see the Zantrap Memorial. But if you step back a little bit and get toward the street, you'll be able to see the Ursula von Ratingsvarg and either the landscape behind it or the Rollins Chapel behind it, which has a lot of stone, which visually speaks beautifully to the Ursula von Ratingsvarg, which I'm really excited about. So maybe I should say that the piece I respond to best is the most recent piece, because that's what every artist will tell you. If you ever ask an artist what their favorite one is, it's always the one they just finished. But I will say I love the Joel Shapiro, and I'm so pleased that we were able to work with Joel Shapiro on that terrific location, which we can see here now. To me, it seems like a natural location for it, and Joel was very happy with it, which I'm happy about.
Great. We also have some questions about online guides to public art on campus. So I'll be sharing those via the chat and the Q&A function. Maybe just one final question. Does Dartmouth have a hole in their collection that if you had the perfect site and budget, you'd want to fill? Either a specific artist or a time period, genre?
Oh, there's a couple, but I can tell you one, and it's not a terribly popular view in some ways, but I really wish we had Matisse. Dartmouth graduates were great on buying Picasso and Cubism and that whole story. And by the way, I'm a modernist, so I'm sure that somebody up here who studied the 17th century would be after the Rembrandt, which, by the way, we need. Anybody with a Rembrandt, let me know. But I just feel like the story of modern art really needs an anchor in Matisse's sentiment and his ideas about color and form. And certainly a sculpture would be fantastic, a large-scale Matisse sculpture. But the list for us goes on pretty long too. But I am a huge fan of Matisse and would love to see, a Matisse back or something like that on campus. That, and then the other thing that we are actually working on, which I think we can do, we are not yet a truly global collection on campus. And so we're going to work on that in the next few years to try and get more voices from around the world on campus and better reflect the student body. So we've done a good job. Most of the artists that we have collected are major, but you might see somebody who's younger getting onto campus and taking their place amongst the giants that are already there.
Excellent. Well, that's about the time we have. We
Okay.
did have someone say that they would love to see a sculpture park on campus and suggested a location for it. So I'll share that with you after.
Great. I'm all ears. I'd love to see a sculpture park for it. The Maffei Arts Plaza can't really be a sculpture park because we have to keep so much of it open for things like performances or a tent for commencement and that sort of thing. But I do love the idea. I've always loved the National Gallery Sculpture Park, where you walk down into it and you have a kind of intimacy with lots of works of art.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this program. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this program and our virtual programming generally. So I'm going to be sending a link to a survey in the chat. Please fill it out if you have a moment. It shouldn't take long. Fall calendar of events will be made available online within the coming weeks, so please keep an eye out on our website and our social media channels for that information. Unless there's anything else you'd like to say, John, we wish everyone well. And
I just want to send out a hello to everybody. Anybody who knows me knows that I love being in a crowd, and I really miss you all. I love the moment when we get to have these talks in the afternoon in our galleries. And I'm really looking forward to getting back in the museum eventually, safely, and seeing you all again. So be safe, be well, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
thank you all. Have a good one.
Okay, bye now.